dying from cancer, from cardiovascular disease, from a variety of different diseases. And that was like
a big
super cool.
decrease, right? Like 40%
yeah, it was huge.
Or something?
Yeah. So, there was a dose-dependent decrease in all-cause mortality. So men that used the sauna once a week compared to those that used it 2 to 3 times a week, they had a decrease, 24% decrease in all-cause mortality. And men that used it like 4 to 7 times a week had a 40% decrease in all-cause mortality. So when I say a 40% decrease in all-cause mortality, I mean over the time span that these men were followed, which was 20 years. So they're following these men for 20 years. They were in their between 50 to 65 when the study started. And those men that had been using the sauna more frequently had a 40% reduction in, dying from many causes that aren't accidental.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's super, super cool. And, there's a lot of things going on with the sauna. The place I'm staying at has a steam shower. So I just had a steam shower before I came here. I'm all endorphin buzzed and feeling good.
Does that work just as good?
It doesn't get as hot as like a typical dry sauna where, the air it's like 174, 79 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty damn hot.
Jesus Christ.
It's
That's
hot.
how hot they get?
Yeah. That's like in my gym, that's pretty much the temperature. It's like 170 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's hot. Steam showers, they get hot, and I definitely feel, my heart racing. So what happens when you're in heat is your heart starts to race, much like cardiovascular exercise, where your heart starts to beat like between 100 and sometimes 150 beats. So it's like, it's pretty fast. And part of the benefit of that is you have increased plasma and blood flow to the heart. So the heart's actually doing less work than it normally would do. But that's part of the cardiovascular benefits that are associated with like exercise and sauna use. But the sauna, in addition to that, has other effects. So, heat stress is a stress, as is exercise. And, the stress activates all these stress response mechanisms in the body. And that's really good. And that's part of the benefit from exercise. It's part of the benefit from any type of, good stress. So heat specifically will activate something called heat shock proteins. So it's a gene that makes something called heat shock proteins. And they're a class of proteins that are activated by heat. So when you exercise and your core body temperature raises, they get activated. And heat shock proteins are pretty awesome because they are able to prevent a certain type of damage that accumulates in our cell from happening. And if you think about the causes of aging, it's an accumulation of damage that's happening in the cell. Like if you're looking at it at the molecular level, the cellular level. And part of that damage occurs in proteins that we make. So DNA is the genetic code. It makes RNA. RNA gets translated into proteins, and proteins are doing all the work inside of our body. So for example, glutathione peroxidase is a very potent antioxidant. It's an enzyme that's using glutathione to do all this great antioxidant stuff. That's a protein. It's a type of protein. So proteins inside of our cells, as we age, they start to dysfunction. They start to aggregate. They aggregate in our blood vessels, can lead to plaques. They aggregate in our brains, amyloid beta plaques. And this happens, this increases as we age. But heat shock proteins prevent that from happening. And so heat stress activates them. And when you have heat stress and they're activated, they're actually activated for a long period of time. In some cases, it can be like a couple of weeks. So it's kind of like you do this heat stress, and then 2 weeks later, you still have these activated heat shock proteins, which are, preventing all this damage from accumulating in your cells. What's really interesting is that if you look in like worms or flies, you expose them to one heat shock, meaning